What happens when two of rock and roll's greatest icons find themselves in the same room? And suddenly the spotlight begins to shift. For a man like Elvis Presley, known for his charm, confidence, and command of any stage, that night took an unexpected turn. Whispers of admiration grew louder, the energy in the room tilted, and for the first time, the king's cool exterior began to crack. What unfolded left his closest friends stunned, and the identity of the legendary visitor who sparked it all will leave you speechless. In the early 1960s, Memphis was more than just a city. It was the beating heart of rock and roll. The streets pulsed with rhythm, from the smoky clubs on Beale Street to the recording studios that had already birthed legends. This was a place where music wasn't just entertainment. It was electricity in the air, shaping a generation and echoing through every corner cafe, jukebox, and passing Cadillac. And at the center of it all was one man whose name carried more weight than any other: Elvis Presley. Graceland, his grand estate, wasn't merely a mansion. It was the fortress of the king himself, a place where stories unfolded behind closed doors that the world would only ever whisper about. Friends, confidants, and occasional rivals came and went through its gates, but inside its walls, the atmosphere shifted depending on Elvis's mood. Some nights were filled with laughter, music, and the comfort of his closest companions. Other nights, tension lingered beneath the surface, waiting for the right spark to set it off. On one of these nights, the circle included familiar names from Elvis's trusted inner world: Sam Phillips, the man who had helped discover his talent; George Klein, a lifelong friend who had been by his side since high school; and Alan Fortas, a loyal member of the Memphis Mafia. But this wasn't an ordinary evening. Someone unexpected was brought along, a figure whose presence would ignite a subtle competition that simmered into something unforgettable. Little did anyone know, by the end of the night, that very guest would push Elvis Presley to a breaking point. Inside Graceland's living room, the atmosphere was electric yet strangely intimate. The grand piano gleamed under the warm lights, its polished surface reflecting the faces gathered close around it. Elvis, always at ease with an instrument, settled himself on one side of the bench while the guest, equally eager to prove his worth, took the other. The room grew quiet, anticipation hanging in the air as two giants prepared to test their talents not on a stage before thousands, but in the comfort of Elvis's own home, before a handful of trusted friends. What followed was nothing short of magical. One would strike up a familiar tune, and the other would immediately pick it up, weaving his own style into the melody. A gospel riff transformed into a rock and roll groove, then back again into a heartfelt ballad. Each note carried not just music, but a challenge, an unspoken duel wrapped in laughter and rhythm. They weren't just playing songs, they were trading stories, emotions, and pride through the ivory keys, each refusing to be outdone. For those lucky enough to witness it, the night felt like a once-in-a-lifetime performance. Here were two icons, larger than life to the outside world, reduced to the raw joy of jamming side by side. No tickets, no screaming fans, no flashing cameras, just the pure electricity of talent clashing and colliding in a living room at Graceland. It was the kind of moment most fans could only dream of, a secret concert hidden from history, one that carried a tension powerful enough to change the mood of the entire night. At first, the gathering felt lighthearted, filled with laughter and playful exchanges as the music carried on. But slowly, the energy in the room began to change. Elvis's closest friends, men who had stood by him through years of fame and frenzy, found themselves captivated by the visitor's dazzling display. Compliments began to flow freely. Comments about how fast his fingers moved across the keys, how effortlessly he commanded the piano, how no one else could quite play like him. What started as casual admiration soon swelled into an almost constant stream of praise, and the focus of the room shifted in a way Elvis could not ignore. For a man like Elvis, confidence was second nature. He had conquered stages across the world, commanded audiences of thousands, and redefined what it meant to be a performer. Yet here, in his own living room, with his own circle of trusted friends, that confidence was being tested in a way few could have imagined. Each laugh, each admiring glance directed at the guest chipped away at the balance of the evening. Though he remained composed on the surface, Those who knew him best could sense the weight behind his silence, a quiet pride bristling at being overshadowed in his own domain. What made the moment even more striking was the contrast between the two men's talents. Elvis had the voice, the unmistakable power and charisma that had earned him the crown as the king of rock and roll. But the guest had the firepower on the keys, bending the piano to his will with a speed and precision that stunned the room. As the duel at the piano stretched on, admiration that once belonged solely to Elvis began to lean heavily toward the visitor. It was subtle at first, but undeniable, and it set the stage for a moment when the king himself would no longer be able to keep his cool. As the night carried on, Elvis and his circle eventually piled into one of his Cadillacs, the energy from the jam session still hanging in the air. Conversation flowed at first, but it quickly turned back to the visitor's remarkable performance. George Klein and Alan Fortas, caught up in their excitement, couldn't help themselves. They went on praising the guest, marveling at the way he had commanded the piano as though it were an extension of his own hands. Their words tumbled out one after another, a stream of admiration that seemed harmless enough, at least to them. Then, without warning, Elvis broke his silence. Turning to his friends, his voice carried an edge rarely heard from him. "If you like the way he plays so much, why don't you go work for him?" The remark cut through the air like a knife, and in an instant, the car fell into a heavy silence. For men who were used to Elvis's charm, wit, and larger-than-life presence, the sharpness of his words was jarring. It wasn't just a joke or playful banter. It was a glimpse into something deeper, a flash of irritation that left everyone stunned. In that moment, Elvis's vulnerability slipped through the cracks of his carefully built exterior. He was a man who thrived on adoration, who was used to being the center of attention, and yet here he was, rattled by the spotlight, shifting, even briefly, onto someone else. It wasn't anger in the traditional sense. It was more personal, a rare exposure of pride and insecurity colliding. For his friends, it was a reminder that even the king of rock and roll was human, capable of being stung by admiration that wasn't directed his way. And as the Cadillac rolled on in uneasy quiet, they all realized they had witnessed a side of Elvis few would ever see. The silence in the car stretched for miles, heavy and uncomfortable, as the glow of Memphis blurred past the windows. No one dared to push further, each man replaying Elvis's sharp remark in his head. Then, almost as suddenly as his irritation had flared, Elvis's expression softened. A chuckle escaped him, low at first, then building into the kind of infectious laughter that only he could deliver. The tension broke like a snapped guitar string, and in that moment, the king reclaimed the easy charm his friends had always known. The storm had passed, and Elvis was once again in control of the room, even if the room was the back seat of a Cadillac. What made the shift so striking was the contrast between the man and the myth. To the world, Elvis Presley was untouchable, a flawless icon who carried the weight of rock and roll on his shoulders. Yet here, among the people who knew him best, he had shown a flash of something undeniably human: jealousy, pride, frustration. For just a heartbeat, the crown slipped, and his friends saw the man beneath the legend. And just as quickly, he slid the crown back on with a grin and a laugh, as though nothing had happened at all. It was a reminder that even the greatest stars are not immune to the tug of ego and the sting of comparison. Legends may shine brighter than the rest of us, but they still feel the same emotions: envy, irritation, the need to be recognized. Elvis's laughter that night wasn't just about brushing off the tension. It was about reclaiming control, proving to his friends and to himself that he was still the king. And yet, the memory of that brief crack in his composure lingered, a rare glimpse behind the curtain of a man the world thought they knew. The visitor that night was none other than Jerry Lee Lewis, the fiery pianist whose very presence could light up a room as easily as it could unsettle it. Known as the Killer, Jerry Lee embodied chaos and brilliance in equal measure, his fingers flying across the keys with a speed and passion that seemed almost otherworldly. For a brief moment inside Graceland, his energy was enough to steal the spotlight from Elvis himself, sparking that rare flicker of irritation from the king. But when the night's music faded into memory, the truth of their legacies told a different story. Elvis Presley went on to cement his place as the enduring icon of rock and roll, filling arenas like Madison Square Garden and redefining what it meant to be a global superstar. Jerry Lee, despite his immense talent, saw his career marked by scandal, personal demons, and a series of setbacks that kept him from reaching the same heights. His brilliance was undeniable, but it burned too hot, too erratic, to last in the way Elvis's steady flame did. That's why the tension between them carried such weight. While Elvis may have bristled in the moment, feeling his pride tested, it was Jerry Lee who lived in the long shadow of envy. He admired Elvis, even as he resented the fact that Presley's career continued to soar while his own faltered. The irony of that night is clear. Elvis's irritation was fleeting, gone as quickly as it came, but Jerry Lee's jealousy of Elvis's enduring success lingered for years. In the end, it wasn't just a clash of talents. It was a glimpse into the complicated rivalry between two men whose lives defined an era of rock and roll. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more untold moments from the King's life, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video. Give this video a like if you found it fascinating, and most importantly, I'd love to hear what you think. Was Elvis right to lose his cool that night, or was it just friendly rivalry? Share your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section, and let's keep the conversation going.